Hi, Jen, and welcome everybody to our Monday afternoon HR Huddle. It's good to be with you. We thought we would follow up on our discussion from last week. We were talking about discerning our priorities and getting approval on the many, many things we all could be doing that we're blessed with. And one of the things Jen and I were talking about was this idea that as we're just discerning our priorities in HR, one of the things, to start to make maybe a mindset shift and also start to, shift how internal leaders, view HR as more of a strategist, more of an advisor, just like we're doing with our clients. We're making that shift to advisor with our clients and doing that with our internal operations functions. And so HR, being seen more as that consultant or more as that advisor. And Jen, I don't know if you had some immediate thoughts on that to kick us off on that topic.
Well, yeah, I think the very first thing is that some of us may approach our HR role a little bit tactically. And we get to meet HR leaders with different titles and different roles in different firms across the country, which is such a privilege. And we see all sorts of different approaches. But one of the ones that we think might be a mistake is that of like order taker or, I'm just here to do what the people tell me, sort of a deal. And so whatever the service lines tell me they need for recruiting, that's what I do. And if somebody comes down and hands down some sort of new initiative, we go ahead and try to get involved and help fulfill it. I think we do want to be of service. So I'm not trying to say let's not be of service. But I think that HR leaders should look at their role as uniquely strategic. And one of the reasons it's strategic is because you were brought into the firm to represent a perspective that most of the people that work in that firm do not have because they weren't educated in the same way you were. They didn't have the same personality and competencies that drew you into human resources and talent management. And as a result of that, you fill some gaps that they have. And sometimes I think we might realize that when we're getting hired, and they might too. But then after you join, they want you to start conforming to their way of thinking, and they want you to start doing whatever they say. And we understand that that's the pressure. But the truth is they need you to step back from things and say, wait a minute, with my background and experience and my perspective that is different, what questions do I have about the strategy? What input do I have about the vision here? What would I recommend that we do if I were an HR consultant from the outside coming in with this problem, challenge, opportunity? And I think we don't approach our work that way very often. We get buried in to-dos and we start just becoming a tactical executor instead of a strategic partner to our service line leaders and to our C-suite and to our other operational leaders too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think if you think about those boxes that we talked about, all the different areas under HR, there's recruiting, and recruiting even can be broken down into, I know it's on-campus recruiting right now, plus experience recruiting, and then there's engagement, and then there's career progression, and then there's general compliance. What do we need to accomplish in each one of those things, and how does that tie into our greater, direction and strategy for HR, and how does it fit in with the strategy of each of our disciplines, our service lines, and our segments, and having a plan for that. I think that can help us start to define the strategic priorities from that perspective. And then to your point, Jen, what are the questions that we should be asking? Otherwise, it's like the idea of the day or the need of the day, and we have to swoop in and handle it. And one of the things I was in a mood about today was the diversity and inclusion, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that that's like a hot topic right now. And we just created a committee ourselves, and we're trying to figure out what our priorities and how that fits into our company's mission. But often what happens is things like that, it's like that's an HR initiative, go do some training on it. And it becomes a check the box. And HR can be very easily relegated to this tactical check the box, okay, now we're in compliance. Instead of what is our strategic goal for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and talking to the leaders about it. How does it fit into our missions? How does it fit into our values? How are we going to measure it? And then learning and development is one piece of that, just one piece of that. But there's so many other aspects that we need to define around that. So I think that's one example.
I think that's a great example, Tamara. And when I think about DE&I in particular, I think that that's an area where we all know we need to do something more.
Right.
We don't have enough racial diversity in our profession. We don't have enough equity, maybe between genders, maybe between generations, certainly between different cultures and races yet. Our organizations aren't inclusive enough. We don't know how to be more inclusive. It's a great idea, but none of us really, it's like one of those things we know we should do, but we don't know how.
Right.
And so, where are our priorities in HR, and how can we help guide what we do as a firm there, so that it isn't just updating a handbook or changing the policy, which is so often, I think, where we end up, like, or developing a new program. I think,
right.
If I'm above the compliance piece, then I become this program developer and program manager. And I feel like, you can get tons of committees and tons of programs, and yet still not really be super clear about how all the stuff that we're managing in HR directly ties to our strategic objectives as an organization. I want to jump in with another example I thought of while you were talking, Tamara, and it's non-traditional staffing.
Yes.
And the reason I want to bring it up is because I talk to a lot of folks who are, freaking out on the lack of resource that they have. They don't have enough leverage, and we're missing a lot in the senior and manager ranks in pretty much all disciplines. And so, firms are like, man, coming into spring busy season, we're not sure what we're going to do in those areas. And non-traditional staffing is an answer potentially. And that's outsourcing, it's offshoring, it's segregating the work differently so that we have different kinds of people doing certain work. An example of that would be segregating 1040s, simple 1040s, and having interns, first years, and non-CPAs participate in that, and not let partners touch 1040s anymore. We call that work segregation. You could use fractional people, which are contractors that you buy a fraction of their time from a fractional staffing provider. There are all these different non-traditional things, and HR should be getting familiar with all of them, understanding what other firms are doing, where they're having success with them, but then partnering with the service line leaders to talk about, like, where are the pain points? Because instead of just having the service line leaders kind of hound you with, where are the people, when will you find the people, and HR sort of feeling like chasing recruiting, why don't we talk about, like, creative strategies and really create a strategic capacity plan where we can potentially partner with third parties and turn the faucet on and off when we need it, so that we're not just completely short people and HR's at fault.
Right.
Sometimes how it kind of ends up being characterized, or at least the tone or the feeling of it.
Right. Well, and I think you just, made me think of one of the ways to be that advisor and that consultant to your service line leaders, to the executive committee. What are we supposed to do with DE&I? If it's not just a learning program, what is it? What are we supposed to do to fill capacity if our recruiters aren't getting the job done? And I think would be my job as the HR professional to be learning about that, to be talking to other, HR professionals. I know there's a lot of different HR groups out there, tapping into those, finding out what people are doing, using other consultants in the profession like us. And there's many others that could, provide direction. But it's that education and that learning and developing the thought leadership in those areas of expertise. And I think that's how you start to elevate and be seen as the source where people are going to turn to you and say, what should we do? Instead of go do this. And it shifts it.
Right. Well, and if you thought about your role, like if you said, Jen and Tamara, sounds great, but they'll never listen to me like that. Well, they will if you become more of that advisor and you create more content or thought leadership, which is really just what Tamara described, doing the learning and then educating and communicating. And it may be building a small presentation and giving it to the partner group, or going and meeting one-on-one with the service line leaders with your presentation and saying, hey, here is what I've learned about this so far. Here are the firms I've talked to. Here's what I think we should be considering. They will start taking advice from you if you feel informed and you feel like you have been doing the research and the learning, and you teach them new ideas. They will think, geez, maybe I should ask so-and-so next time. You have to shift it. And I often, this is another thing, and boy, I feel like I say this on every single thing I ever do, but we're 100% responsible for our success and the way we're heard. And so sometimes we kind of blame leadership, like those partners won't listen to me anyway, or, they never invite me to a meeting, or I've never, they never let me come to the strategic planning retreat, all that. I get it. Sometimes that's how we're positioned, and that stinks, and I don't like it. But what could you do? What could you do to change it? What could you do that you haven't been doing? Could you build a strategic plan for HR? Literally create a strategic plan. We have a template. Email us, we'll send you a template. It's not very hard, but it does take a lot of thinking and planning and some research and some learning and getting input. But maybe that's missing right now in your life. You don't have your own approach to your function yet, and a clear strategy and organization for that. And that might be part of your challenge. And also, like, some of you might be like, well, they won't let me add the head count necessary to operate strategically. Well, maybe they will if you illustrate that you need it.
Right. And start to document it. If we can start to document, here's all the things, we could be doing or that have been requested we do in each of those areas. And then we can start to say, how do we create the roles, and what do we have today? And if we had additional roles, what could they do? Again, that's an education piece. They don't know how to think about the roles and how to, create the HR function. That's a whole nother piece that's a part of your strategy, is what does your HR function look like, and what are those roles and responsibilities, and where do we need additional capacity? And it could be external capacity. We might be able to outsource some of that, ourselves to be able to get that done. You made me think of something else, Jen, when you were talking about the education piece, and it's really building strong relationships inside the firm. So really having strong relationships with those service line leaders, with the partner group, with the executive committee, and it probably starts with one-on-one, sit down with them, and it could be via Zoom or some kind of video chat right now. If you're not in the office or they're not in the office, but sitting down and having a conversation and saying, what are your needs? What are you planning for? What are your pain points? Just like we would do with an external client, and having that kind of check-in conversation to understand what they're planning for, what they have, challenges with, what they would like to see. It's like, what could I do better? What could I provide more? Is there anything that we should stop doing? We like to use the keep, stop, start. That's a great place to use keep, stop, start. But it really is a bunch of open-ended questions to listen and learn and figure out what they need. So then I can come back with a proposed plan as part of my strategic plan for HR for how to best serve them and agree on priorities. Because I think most people are realistic. They're not going to expect you to get this whole laundry list done. But let's agree, here's the list. We're going to start here. And most people are reasonable, go, that sounds perfect. If we made a dent in those and we made progress in those areas, that would be phenomenal. So that internal networking, those internal relationships are crucial, and we probably don't spend enough time on those, especially in the one-on-one, to really build those relationships.
And I was just sitting here thinking that it always comes down to, it's all about relationships, and you gave some ideas for some questions to ask. And I do think those one-on-ones need to start with the mindset that you're going in to learn, not to tell the first time around. But also, don't forget about personal rapport.
Yes.
So, you gave some what I would call professional rapport questions, which is like, what are your top goals? What are your big challenges? How can I help? What feedback do you have for me? Those are professional rapport questions. Personal rapport questions are like, I don't know if I've ever asked you, but I wonder if you'd be willing to share your journey. How did you get here? What has your journey been like? And did you grow up here? Where did you grow up? What brought you to this firm? Where were you before? Maybe I'd read their LinkedIn profile or their bio for the firm and know a little more, but where'd you go to school? What do you do for fun? All those things make us more related to our internal constituents. And they're the same things we teach to service providers when they're trying to build relationships with tax or audit or accounting or advisory clients. These same techniques we teach them are internal Operational leaders and the folks that work in operations need to build that same rapport with their constituents, their internal clients.
Right. Yeah, it's so important. And it's something we skip over. We just step over that personal relationship, and just making sure that we know who they are. We know what's important to them. It'll have us be more related also. So it's just, I think, critical.
And it creates more stakeholders that feel like they care about you. And like, if then we're in a bigger group meeting and I'm attending and I'm the HR person, I've built rapport with 5 of the 8 people there. We're all talking about something. When it's my turn to talk, they might listen to me more respectfully. They might invite me into the conversation if it looks like I'm getting edged out or not getting a word in, because they care about me. They're going to maybe invite me in and want to be part of that. So those are all things to be thinking about. It benefits, I guess.
Yes.
Also, though, you'll know their issues better.
Right.
You'll know them better. And sometimes when they're upset or mad or stressed or complaining or whatever they might be doing that makes you feel a little bit defensive, you might have more empathy and compassion for their circumstances, and you might feel more like a partner with them in their problems, which never hurts.
Yes. Well, and you'll know how to relate to them is the bottom line. The other thing is, as you're getting those individual conversations, we're always listening for themes. And that is another way to identify what should go in my strategic plan and what my priorities are. If I talk to 8 people and 6 of them say, capacity and yes, this fractional talent, oh my gosh, what is that? Tell me about that. How do we fill in that gap? Then that might be one of the recruiting paths that we go down. Or we talk about, remote. What do we need to do from a remote perspective? And it's the culture and the mental health. And I heard that several times. That could help me, fill in my talent engagement and talent development. So I'll start to hear themes, which will help you prioritize. So I think one of the reasons we don't go talk to every single person is like, I can't help all of them with their whole list of stuff. You don't have to. You will start to see what the top things are as a firm that we need to do. And then by individual, I can customize it. And it's not so daunting. So it's one of the ways to synthesize it down, I think, as well. Sometimes I think we get overwhelmed by the masses, and we can just say, hey, this is what we heard, some top priorities are, across many of you. So how do we start there? And this is what I suggest. This is what I recommend we start with.
The other piece of that, Tamera, is some of us, we have longtime leaders in some of these roles, and they're going to transition out at some point.
Yeah.
And we need to figure out what their strategies are and help them with that transition. And not having good rapport will not help with our being able to make their transition more successful. So I think that's just another potential. The other thought I had while you were talking is this idea that, I might be a long time HR leader in the firm. I've been here a long time. I know everybody. I'm like, I don't know, a key leader. People come to me for things. I know all these people. We could have an accidental, I already know going on. And that I already know is dangerous, because the market is moving swiftly and conditions are changing, and they're changing in weird ways for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. And I don't think any of us already knows anything anymore. And so we have to be so careful that we don't have this, the opposite of I feel like I'm not included, to where I'm so included, I don't need to do the listening tour. Mm-hmm. I think that's another thought that I just want to layer in here, is that we probably want to jump in and ask. And there's Brandon, teaching outside the comfort zone. I love it. I do. I love that. And thanks for being here today, Brandon. I'm glad to see you.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good point on the I already know. And, I don't know any of us that have run a practice in a pandemic in 2020 with the technology. And so there's just so much uncertainty. And sometimes it's scary to acknowledge that. And that might just need to be what happens in those one-on-ones. And, just what are you afraid of? What are you worried of? Where is this outside your comfort zone? And I might not be able to directly help them, but in my conversations, I might be able to, or I might just have the exact idea or strategy or somebody to introduce them to that I could help them with that. But, just being able to have that kind of confidant and to be able to explore what those are, I think is really important.
Another pitfall that I want to point out related to this whole idea of getting support for your strategic thinking and your advisory, focus is there are tough customers inside your firm. There are people that aren't necessarily your fans. Or if they are your fans, they object to core fundamental principles that you may think are crucial. Yes. And I'll give you an example. Because I have about 10,000 that many people object to. But one of them is, one of my fundamental principles is this crazy idea called hire ahead, okay? You can either have a hire behind strategy, which means we'll sell all this stuff and then we'll hire enough people to serve it. Or you can have a hire ahead strategy, which is we're going to hire ahead of our needs and then we will sell into that excess capacity if we don't fill it naturally through turnover or other issues. So I live in hire ahead land. Most of public accounting lives in hire behind land. Mm-hmm. So I might philosophically disagree with someone, and I would not avoid them in my listening tour. Right. In fact, they would be at the top of my list. Right. I would be building personal rapport and trying to find a way to love them, as not in a weird way, but in a caring, professional, caring way. I would build a friendship with them. Right. I would do everything in my power to understand their point of view and their challenges and their issues. And I would try to use that as the basis to discuss our philosophical disconnects and try to explain my perspective and hear theirs as well and find some middle ground or get them to trust me and let me try something. Let us do a proof of concept or something, but only after I build that rapport. Sometimes we can be kind of wimpy. And we could be like, well, I know, I'll go listen to the people I like. I'll go listen to the people that I agree with, that I know I can help. I'm not going to go visit with those ones that I don't think like me or we don't think alike. Right. And that's a huge mistake. And we see that happen a lot. And we understand it too. I understand the desire to avoid those people. It's a little scary to think about engaging that way. But if you go in I want to get to know you and I want to get to know your latest challenges, issues, opportunities, strategies. Where are you headed? What is your vision for your group? Right. I'm not going in there to say, let's battle it out on our disagreements right now. If I start there and really start building a relationship, at some point I can say, I feel like you and I have some disconnects. And I feel like we should just start trying to pull them apart a little bit at a time to see where there might be some connecting points to our disconnects. Right. And see if there's some place for us to move forward with them. So that's another strategy for those of you who might say, well, I've done all this other stuff. That's an advanced idea that you should be getting on. Well, and I know we're about at time. I want to wrap up on one thought that maybe to leave people with on that idea with patience. And we talk about the law of 7, and we need to communicate something 7 times for it to stick. And I think that requires in our conversations for people to, gain buy-in for an idea and to show evidence or proof of concept or show other firms. It's not one conversation and now I'm upset because they didn't listen to me. We also need to set aside our ego often, because I might have said it 7 times and now they heard it from somebody else. And it's like this bright epiphany that they had. We could be a little indignant about it, but rather I actually primed that. I made them ready to hear that message. So if we can have some patience and some humility, that will go a long way in those relationships, but also driving the change and making the difference that you're committed to make. Such a great point, Tamera. So I think we need to wrap it up for this afternoon, and we will plan on seeing you here next Monday. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you for the dialogue in the chat, and let us know if you have any questions. Reach out to us at any time or connect with us. Thanks. Thanks all. Bye.